He wasn't supposed to say anything. That was the thing nobody understood at first. Shohei Ohtani had already done everything the game asked of him that night. He had performed. He had delivered. The scoreboard told the story clearly enough. There was no reason to add words to what had already been said in the language of baseball, in bat speed and exit velocity and the particular crack of a ball hit exactly right. But Ohtani said something anyway. And when the Minnesota Twins manager heard what it was, when those words reached him through the noise of a post-game field that was still buzzing with the residue of everything that had just happened, something broke open in him. Not dramatically. Not in the way that ends up on the highlight reel. In the quiet way that happens when a man hears something true that he wasn't expecting to hear. The Twins manager stood near the dugout railing for a long moment after that conversation ended. A member of his coaching staff saw it. Didn't interrupt. Just watched. Later, when someone asked what had happened, the answer was simple and impossible to fully explain at the same time. Shohei Ohtani had told him the truth about his own team. To understand why that moment carried the weight it did, you have to understand what the Twins had been carrying into this series. It was not a team without talent. Anyone who had watched them play knew that. The roster had pieces. The pitching had shown flashes of something real. And in Chucky Robinson, a name that had only recently started appearing in the conversations that matter, the ones happening in dugouts and front offices and the quiet corners of batting cages at 6 in the morning, there was something that felt like the beginning of a story not yet finished. But beginnings are fragile things. Everyone in baseball knows that. A player can look like the future for 3 weeks and then disappear back into the depth chart like a stone dropped into deep water. The game has a way of finding the cracks in a young player's confidence and widening them slowly, methodically, without mercy. Robinson had felt those cracks. He hadn't said so publicly. He was not that kind of player, not someone who let the internal weather show on the surface. But people close to him had noticed. The at-bats that went a little too long. The moments of hesitation at the plate that weren't there 2 months ago. The small signs that a young hitter uses to tell the world, without meaning to, that something in him is searching for solid ground. His manager had noticed too. That was the weight he was carrying. And then came Ohtani. It did not start as a mentorship. That word is too formal for what actually happened. What actually happened was a batting practice session 3 days before the series began, a moment that fell into place the way the best baseball moments always do, not by design but by the particular accident of 2 people being in the same place at the same time with nowhere urgent to be. Robinson was working on something specific. Anyone watching could see it, the slight adjustment in his load, the way he was trying to find a timing mechanism that felt natural but kept arriving a half beat early. It was the kind of mechanical puzzle that a hitting coach can describe in technical language and a hitter can understand intellectually and still not solve, because the solution lives in the body before it lives in the mind. Ohtani was nearby. Not watching intently. Not making a thing of it. But present in the way that great players are always present, absorbing information without appearing to seek it. At some point, without fanfare, without asking permission or making an announcement, he said something to Robinson. Not long. Not complicated. 4 sentences, maybe 5. Robinson stopped. Looked at him. Hit the next pitch into the gap. Nobody filmed it. Nobody wrote it down. The moment existed only for the 2 people inside it, and for the handful of people who happened to be watching from the edges of the field and understood enough about hitting to know that something had just shifted. Dave Roberts was one of those people. He did not talk about it immediately. Roberts has a manager's instinct for knowing which stories belong to the moment and which ones need time before they can be told properly. This was one that needed time. But when the series was over, when the games had been played and the results were recorded and the Twins manager's reaction had become the thing everyone was asking about, Roberts sat down in front of the cameras with the expression of a man who had been waiting for someone to ask the right question. A reporter asked him about Robinson's breakthrough hit. The one that had come in the third game. The one that had silenced a stadium for exactly 3 seconds before the noise came flooding back in. Roberts nodded slowly. "I want to be careful about how I say this," he began. Not because he was uncertain. Because he wanted to get it exactly right. Shohei saw something in that kid 3 days before we played them. Something specific. And he told him. Not in a showy way. Not in a way that made a story out of it. He just told him, the way you tell someone something because it's true and because they need to hear it. He paused. And then that hit happened. And I thought about what Shohei had said to me after that batting practice session. Roberts looked down at the table for a moment. He told me Robinson was going to break through in this series. Those were his exact words. He's going to break through in this series. I didn't say anything at the time. I just filed it away. The room was very quiet. He was right. The hit itself deserves its own moment in this story. Second game of the series. 2 outs. Runner on second. The kind of at-bat that defines what a young player is made of, not because of what the statistics say but because of what the moment demands. There is a particular silence that falls over a stadium when baseball becomes something more than a game, when the crowd senses that what they are watching matters in a way that will outlast the box score. Robinson stood in the batter's box with that silence pressing down on him from all directions. He did not rush. That was the thing. The Chucky Robinson of 2 months ago would have rushed. Would have been pulled forward by the weight of the moment into something that looked like aggression but was actually anxiety wearing a disguise. This Robinson waited. Found his timing. Stayed back on a breaking ball that most hitters at his stage of development would have been out in front of by a full foot. And he hit it. Hard. Into the left center gap. The runner scored. The stadium became noise again. And Robinson stood at second base with the expression of a man who had not surprised himself, because he had already seen this coming, in some part of himself that a 5-sentence conversation 3 days earlier had helped him locate. The Twins' dugout erupted. His teammates found him. His manager watched from the top step with an expression that existed somewhere between pride and something more complicated than that. Something that had been searching for solid ground had found it. The Twins' manager came to find Ohtani after the game. This part of the story was not announced. It was not part of a scheduled post-game exchange or an organized moment for the cameras. It happened in the corridor between the 2 clubhouses, the in-between space that exists in every stadium, neutral ground, belonging to no one. He had something he needed to say. He said it. What he said has not been repeated in full by anyone present. But the shape of it has been described by people who understand what it cost him to say it, because this was not a man accustomed to giving credit in that direction, not because of arrogance, but because the weight of managing a team makes you careful about where you direct gratitude. You become protective of your players' stories. You don't want anyone else to be the author of something that belongs to them. But what Ohtani had done for Robinson was not something that could be left unacknowledged. It was too real. Too specific. Too clearly connected to the moment that had just happened on the field. So he found him. And he told him what he had seen. And Ohtani, who does not perform emotion, who does not manufacture moments for the benefit of whoever might be watching, listened. And then he said something back. Something quiet. Something that the Twins' manager later described, to someone he trusted, as the most honest thing any opposing player had ever said to him. What was it? He said, "Your team is closer than you think. Don't stop believing what you already know." The Twins' manager didn't answer right away. He nodded once. And then, in the way that certain truths arrive not gently but all at once, something moved through him that he hadn't expected to feel that night. Someone on the Dodgers' side of the corridor saw his expression in that moment. They remembered it. Roberts was not finished. After he described Robinson's hit and what Ohtani had told him before the series, a reporter asked a question that took the conversation somewhere unexpected. how has Ohtani's presence shaped the Dodgers through the injury crisis of the last several weeks? Roberts didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be choosing not just the words but the order of them, the sequence that would make the thing he was trying to say land correctly. When you lose players, he finally began, there's a version of a team that shrinks into itself. That gets smaller. That starts playing not to lose instead of playing to win. It's human. It's understandable. But it's deadly for a team that wants to go somewhere in October. He leaned forward slightly. Shohei doesn't shrink. That's the thing. I've watched him through every difficult stretch of this season and he does not shrink. He prepares the same way. He competes the same way. He shows up, and I mean this very literally, the exact same way regardless of what the injury report looks like or what the standings say or what the narrative around the team has become. Roberts picked up the water bottle on the table. Set it back down. And that matters more than people realize. Because the guys who are hurting, the guys who are fighting through something, the guys who are trying to hold their confidence together with whatever they have left, they watch him. Every day. They watch how he carries it. And it tells them something about how they should carry it too. He paused. That's not a thing you can teach. You either have that presence or you don't. Shohei has it in a way I've never seen in 40 years of baseball. The injury crisis itself had been the kind of thing that tests the character of an organization at every level. Players who were supposed to be available weren't. Roles that had been clearly defined at the start of the season had blurred and shifted under the pressure of circumstance. The depth chart had been rewritten more times in a few weeks than it normally would be in a full season. Through all of it, Ohtani had been the fixed point. The constant that everything else moved around. Not by making speeches. Not by calling team meetings or posting messages or delivering the kind of motivational moment that gets turned into a social media clip. But by doing what he has always done, arriving first, leaving last, preparing with an attention to detail that borders on the obsessive, and treating every game as if the season depends on it, because for Shohei Ohtani, every game does. Robinson had seen it from the opposing side. 3 days of watching it up close had told him something about what professional excellence actually looks like when you strip away all the mythology and all the contract numbers and all the noise and get down to the thing itself. What it looks like is someone who never stops working. Who never decides that what he has already achieved is enough. Who shows up for batting practice in a rival stadium 3 days before a series and quietly, without being asked, tells a young hitter something true. After everything had been said, after the press conferences were over and the corridor conversation had faded back into the private space where it belonged, one image remained. The Twins manager, standing near the dugout railing in the quiet of a stadium that was almost empty now. The game long finished. The result settled. The story already beginning to take its permanent shape in the record books. He stood there for a while. Not because he had lost. He had coached long enough to understand losing. Not because Robinson's hit had stung, that was baseball, and baseball stings everyone eventually. He stood there because of what Ohtani had said to him in that corridor. Because of the particular feeling that arrives when someone sees your team clearly, more clearly, in some ways, than you have allowed yourself to see them, and tells you so without agenda, without performance, without anything to gain from the telling. Your team is closer than you think. Don't stop believing what you already know. He replayed it once more. Nodded to no one. Then he turned and walked back through the tunnel. And somewhere on the other side of the stadium, Shohei Ohtani was already preparing for what came next. He always is.